Welcome back to the Digimon Seasonal Reviews, the only place that shows off complete craziness. I'm AJ, and today we'll be looking at what is considered to be the best season of the entire show, Digimon Tamers. This is definitely going to be the review where I incorporate Shareverse material the most, because so much happens in 1992, it's insane. There's 2 seasons that occur back to back, and in the middle we have a movie from neither season. So get comfy, it's gonna be wild. Continuing off from Frontier's experiments in 1991, Shinji continued to try and test out more stuff in the digital world, and this is where some of the familiarity comes into play. For starters, the leveling system in each stage of a Digimon was cemented. The digital world was now just one world, without any zones or sections, and Shinji was considering dropping the accelerated time frame altogether. However, he knew that the Japanese government was considering pulling the plug. They already had to cover up 4 different digital worlds invasions in the span of 2 years, and they were not enthused of having a 5th. If it were to happen, Shinji could potentially have to shut down the project entirely, jeopardizing his decade of misery. As such, Shinji began to form decoy organizations to help prevent his project's termination. One of these were the Monster Makers, which features members from around the world, and he told them that if the government tries to find out who made the digital world, they would be the fall guys. Shortly later, other companies and research teams began following the success of the Monster Makers, and one of which being called Hypnos. Though still working under Shinji, these companies had free control to experiment and play with the digital world. It was only inevitable that another human Digimon contact would occur with these circumstances. After the disastrous Digimon 02, again in my opinion, Toei realized that if they want the anime to survive, they would have to change up their strategy. As such, Digimon Tamers would completely revolutionize the way people watch the show, and the first major change was the lack of any continuity. Even in America, Fox Kids had a huge marketing push that this season would not be like the last 2. And of course, the biggest change, and what makes Tamers considered to be the best season, is that it's dark. It handles more deeper themes, serious topics, and of course, nightmare fuel. Because of this, many people like to jokingly call Tamers Evangelion for kids. Ironic. To be honest, the only reason why this season gets that moniker is because it starts out cheery at first, but ends up in an acid trip. That name serves better for Darling in the Franxx. I'm kidding. Obviously. So let's get into Tamers, or Digimon 03 as my box set calls it, even though they also have the Tamers logo on it. Yeah, this was definitely made before Tri was a thing. Despite its differences, Tamers isn't too alien, and that is reinforced in the opening theme song. The English dub has a remix of the classic theme song, and as for Japan, they got the best opening theme next to Butterfly, The Biggest Dreamer. Shout out to this promotional performance of Koji Wada singing the song, sandwiched between 2 people in a Guillemot suit and a completely terrifying Takato cosplay. Tamers has a pretty straightforward progression with story arcs: the Hypnos arc, the Deva arc, the Digital World arc, and of course the D-Reaper arc. And this season is tied with Data Squad for the most expansive arcs of the show, since it goes all over the place. But that's not what makes Tamers shine. If there's one thing people know about Digimon, is that the characters in Tamers are the best cast. Unlike the seasons before, Tamers focuses on 3 characters, and one of them is a girl. Many people call them the Primary Colors because that's the name of the song they sing in Japan. I think some people call them the 3 Children, again another Evangelion reference. But yeah, the Primary Colors, red, green, and blue. Hey, wait a minute, Takato is the main character, and he definitely fits the main shonen archetype. He's a kind and shy person that is put up to the front line in saving the world. You can definitely see a lot of Shinji's character traits in him, even having a inside the womb moment. The only difference here is that Takato didn't jack off to Rika's comatose body, but close enough. Guillemon is the bread boy, and I want to make the correction that Guillemon is a dragon, not a dinosaur. He dark digivolves into Megidramon, which is a dragon-type Digimon. In other words, dragon. He's played by the great Steve Blum, and in Japan, he's played by Misako Nozawa. Either way, he's played by Goku.
You can't beat me. I can tell without fighting you.
He does have a childish attitude in exploring things, but it's not too annoying. I think it's the perfect balance of being serious, but also silly. Now, even though Takato is the main character that we follow the most, I would argue that Henry is the main character. First off, he's played by Dave Wittenberg, and thank God, 13-year-old me watched Tamers before playing any of the Xenosaga games, because now I cannot unhear Alan Ridgely whenever Henry speaks. He uses the exact same voice for both characters.
All you're doing is using that tremendous power to run away! You knew, didn't you? You knew this would happen when you scanned Terriermon!
Oh yeah, I guess he also plays Kakashi in Naruto, and also Cielo in Digital Devil Saga.
Scale of 1 to 10, I give it a 3.
Yikes. But Henry has more character growth than Takato. His dad was the one responsible for creating the digital world, and he feels regret for it. His mom is a nervous wreck. He has a younger sister who later gets a Digimon herself. Sound familiar? He has the most connections to the digital world itself, and he is the one that fully defeats the D-Reaper in the end. Henry should be just as important as Takato. Additionally, his partner is probably the most popular non-lead Digimon in the series, Terriermon. And once again, he is a dog. Even though he looks like a rabbit, even though he is a palette swap of Lopmon, who is a rabbit, Terriermon is a dog, like the dog breed. Even Mecha Gargomon has a dog muzzle. Dog! Last one up is Rika. I kind of find it interesting that Digimon always has a thing for the main characters having the main colors of red and or orange, and the right-hand man having blue. However, because the only other male lead in the trio has the main color green, it feels weird that Rika doesn't stand among the likes of Matt, Koji, and Thomas. Rika is honestly the least I can relate to, not because I'm not a girl, but because I wasn't a victim of my parents getting a divorce and blaming myself for it. Also, kudos for Fox Kids to just flat out say Rika's parents got a divorce. In a time of jelly donut rice balls and locking dead people up in cells, this really showed Digimon wasn't afraid to step out of the comfort barrier for an English dub. I'm not saying her character is bad because I can't relate to it, but definitely is a good character arc. She doesn't want to be just like her mother being a fashion model, and she opens up to both her grandmother and her mom about her real feelings, as well as her partner. And that's exemplified with her Broken Heart t-shirt, which later she wears a full one towards the end of the season to complete her character arc. Also, at one point in the season, she becomes racist towards Digimon because she got harassed and almost murdered by Ice Devimon. I have no idea what that was about. Speaking of, there's Renamon. And look, there's no way around it. She's 100% furry bait. I never really understood it, but I guess I can see why people would rock their socks off to it. Much like Rika, Renamon starts out cold and isolated, obeying Rika's commands of absorbing a defeated Digimon's data so she can become stronger. As the season goes on, she begins to drop this kill or be killed mindset and becomes a helpful ally to the others and even caring for Rika. Also, apparently they have a telekinetic bond. In the third episode, Rika and Renamon talk, but it looks like that time has stopped. Does Rika know how to stop time? Is Renamon the world? There are two things that she says towards the end of the season that go completely against stuff that we have seen before and after Tamers.
The D-Reaper and we Digimon don't have parents. It's a new concept for it. Actually, Digimon aren't divided into genders.
So for Shareverse, I gave an in-universe explanation to why Renamon thinks like that. She was raised by a Marsmon who was very strict with how the digital world works, teaching her that Digimon are just pieces of data that should not grow emotions or any attachment that could be similar to human feelings. Because they're just data, why would they need to have a conscience? And that's how she was taught for a while until the years gone by and began to soften up with these ideals. Also doesn't help that people call Renamon with female pronouns. What, you're telling me that there could be a male Sakuyamon using Renamon's logic? I'm not judging, but I'm just saying it's improbable. And funny enough, the German dub has Renamon as a guy, which makes Sakuyamon all the more unnerving. Additionally, there are also other characters that tag along during the adventure. First are Takato's school friends, Kazu, Kenta, and Jerry. And yeah, you can make the similarities there. I also like how they didn't make Takato the generic loner who has no friends. He's still friends with these people, he just keeps to himself the most in his group circle. Kazu is the hot-headed one that thinks he can take on the world. Sure, he might joke around, but his heart's in the right place. Kenta tries to take things lightly and softly, wanting to analyze things when they go to the digital world. Their partners reflect this trait, with Gardramon always on the offensive and Marine Angemon at the defensive. Really like this dynamic. And then there's Jerry. What did I say before? It handles more deeper themes, serious topics, and of course, nightmare fuel. Oh yeah, that. Her mom died when she was young and suppresses herself with a childlike demeanor, mainly because she's afraid to live in the world alone. Holy shit, looking back, the season is really dark, especially with the final arc hammering the theme of destiny over and over again. This is later established with her bond with Leomon, and how she wants to be a tamer alongside the others. However, her past trauma catches up to her when he dies, and becomes an easy target for the D-Reaper to latch itself onto. I forgot to mention this before, but Digimon is a thing where if you're either a Leomon, Wizardmon, or any variation of those two, you will die. However, Jerry is fully aware of others around her, she just decides to not interact any further, such as the case with her relationship with her stepmother being tainted, and ordering Takato to spare Beelzemon's life. Of course, in the end with her bonds in Calumon, as well as her renewed perspective of life, she does aid in the final battle with the D-Reaper, weakening it on the inside. Also, many people believe that Jerry's new partner should be Calumon because of their bond in the end, but she already had her bonds and character arc with Leomon. 2 is way too much for a secondary character. I should also bring up Calumon and how he's just there. In a way, he's a walking plot device that only does things when the plot demands it, that being allowing someone to digivolve or get captured. Which leads us into our villains, or let me better phrase it, villains, because Tamers doesn't have a specific main villain. Sure, there's your generic monster of the week Digimon, but the recurring ones aren't even that bad. And for proof, let me show you. Yamaki is a cold-hearted sociopath that kills Digimon for the sake of research and his ultimate weapon Juggernaut to wipe them out. But gotcha! He realizes that he was in the wrong and helps the Tamers out. The 12 datas are based off of the Buddhist 12 generals that want to capture Calumon and kill him for the Digimon Sovereigns. Gotcha! They realize that humans and Digimon share the strongest power imaginable and prepares them for the D-Reaper. Imon is a partner who's got ties with his Tamers and lives on his own and causes chaos in the real world just because he can. His rage leads him into becoming Beelzemon, the baddest motherfucker in the digital world. He kills Leomon and shows no remorse for it. No, gotcha! He realizes that he was in the wrong and reconciles with his Tamers and helps them out fighting the D-Reaper. The only villain that doesn't follow this is the D-Reaper, but that's because it's a mindless computer program whose sole purpose is to delete data. Like, I get the message of Tamers is that broken people can be redeemed, and we do see that transition of bad to good with these characters. Yamaki starts out seeing Digimon as fragments of data with no life and deserve to be deleted, only to realize that they are much smarter than what he expected and rethinks his morals, even getting some encouragement from his lady friend Riley to help his former enemies. And I can't be the only person that thinks of the teleporting ladies from the Mega Man Zero games when I see Riley and her other friends. Yeah, she's so insignificant and cucked up by Yamaki that I forgot her name and I don't care. I also shouldn't diss Imon either. I like how we get his reasoning for why the way he is early on in the season and the frustration that he has with human partners. His partners were irresponsible for taking care of him because, well, they were just smaller children. This nature leads into his careless freedom as Beelzemon, doing whatever he wants, not regretting anything. It's not until the end of the season where he reconciles with his partners and how they didn't mean for him to get upset. Also, I kinda wish we saw more of Ai and Mako, realizing that they took Imon for granted throughout the season instead of seeing him some 40 episodes later, and they already forgive Imon by the time he comes back to them. Speaking of younger kids, there's Henry's little sister Susie. She plays the stereotypical annoying little sister that finds anything cute, but it doesn't get annoying since she's not a major focus, and it only occurs towards the second half of the season. Her Digimon, paralleling her brother, is a Lopmon, finally getting the right colors for once. And she is always pissed, like every time she's on screen, she looks like somebody shit in her sandwich. And last but certainly not least is Ryo Akiyama, a character I briefly went over. In a way, he serves more as a guest character than an actual character on the show, but even without the context of him originating from a collection of Japanese-only games, his character is pretty cool. Much like other characters, he starts out isolated but warms up to the others, and also hitting on Rika. I think their relationship works. It's not as annoying as Davis hitting on Kari, but not as insulting as shipping Zoe with Koji. This isn't the first time we've actually seen Ryo in the anime. He has 2 minor cameos in the past, one in our war game and the other in Zero 2. I bet a bunch of kids here in America would have lost their minds if they connected the dots that Ryo was the guy that Ken was with in his flashback. And Cybergermon losing control could just be part of his character without the context of him having Millenniumon inside of him. And one quick thing to note. I find it amusing that in the I Hate Everything video on anime, where he lists off the tropes of main characters, he uses Ryo as an example. I don't know why he picked him and not Takato. All you have to do is go on Google Images and type in Digimon Tamers main character, and you'll get your answer right away. He also uses Eren Yeager as an example, which I also find hilarious. Granted, this is still Season 1 Eren, but Season 4 Eren, whoa! Also, Ryo's Japanese voice actor is Sonic. No, I am not making that up. Remember how in Frontier I mentioned Rika did most of the recaps? Well, this pseudo-tradition actually started in Tamers. And unfortunately, the recaps are done by Davis.
Takato and the gang stumbled into a forgotten little town that was being terrorized by this deranged motorcycle.
Great. And that's basically the main cast. Sure, there's other characters like Henry's dad that feels regret for what he did, but those characters bounce off the main cast regardless. So, with that out of the way, let's get into this season's soundtrack. Oh my god, I forgot about Alice! pretty much the most unnecessary character in the whole series. Her importance in the series is accumulated into one episode where her Digimon's sole purpose is to die. Apparently, Dobermon's data can allow biomerging in the real world. Okay, why does he have to die for that? Oh, who cares, because immediately after, Justimon shows up! Yeah! And Alice doesn't get any resolution. She just shows up and leaves. With that interruption out of the way, the music is really top tier here. Sure, we still have the character songs, followed by their partner songs, followed by their duets, but they're mostly sporadic. Aside from the biggest streamer, there's the insert songs, Slash, Evo, and One Vision, all sung by different people. But there were also other notable songs, primarily the Primary Colors, a group ballad by Takato, Henry, and Rika. The character songs work as a slow and soft one that does appear in the anime twice. I also want to bring up Kaz as well, the B-side of the biggest streamer, also a great song. And as for the end credit songs, both are performed by AIM, My Tomorrow, and Days. Unfortunately, the English dub does not carry or replicate any of these songs, but that's expected. But now, let's talk about the season and the 4 arcs, starting with the Hypnos arc. It has a linear structure. There's a Digimon of the Week that the primary colors have to beat and gain character development. Although one question that has to be brought up. Takato created Guilmon. He didn't exist in the digital world beforehand, despite the 2 seasons and the Shareverse timeline having Guilmon and his Digivolutions be present before. So, for this plot hole, Takato didn't necessarily create Guilmon. Instead, he came to him the same way the other partners did, though it was more abrupt here. Also, how did Shinji give out Terriermon and Renamon to their tamers? He just randomly selected them on the die. Plus, because of the Quartzmon incident in 1990, Shinji knew which kids would later become Digidestined in the future, and waited for the right time to give them their partners. Same for the guys at Frontier, it was just more subtle there. Anyway, we do get some things that people would have expected from the first 2 seasons, but occur later on. For starters, Terriermon already has his champion form by the start of the season, and Renamon and Guilmon get theirs only a couple of episodes later. Instead, their method of fighting is using modify cards that grant them temporary boosts and skills from other Digimon. This too is later expanded on throughout the season. In the show, Digimon is a brand. The show, the card games, and the first 2 seasons are works of fiction. Nobody knows that they actually exist, hence why they use the trading cards for battle. By 92 in Shareverse, the digital world almost became exposed to the world, but the proxy companies I brought up from before were aware of this and made pseudo trading cards of digital monsters, allowing Shinji to continue his research while also bleeding out his plans on the streets of Shinjuku. Additionally, most of the fights take place in this plane of existence between the real and digital world. Definitely gives a different landscape for these fights. This arc concludes with Juggernaut about to be launched, but is quickly taken down by the 3 heroes. In a way, this arc feels very Spielbergian, if that makes any sense. A loner kid who befriends a supernatural creature, and the government wants to separate the 2 of them. Even with the aforementioned episode of Growlmon trying to hide from the public eye, carrying tons of aspects from 80s family movies. Only in Digimon can you start out as E.T. and end up as End of Evangelion. Next up is the Deva arc, again based off of the Buddhist 12 Generals. Once again, every episode has a Deva appear in the real world, and the primary colors have to defeat them. Around this point is where they get their ultimate forms, and one thing I have to address. For both Ultimate and Mega sequences, Guilmon and Terriermon get 3D models for their transformations, and yet Renamon is stuck with 2D. I'm not saying it's sexist, but I wonder if they were concerned that neither Taomon or Sakuyamon would look good in 3D. Their models in the games look fine. I guess they don't want to spend too much money on the budget. By now, you have noticed that the primary colors have Digivolution sequences, and no one else does. And that's because they kind of don't need them. Andromon de-digivolves back into Gardromon, Marine Angemon is already a Mega, Lopmon jumps to her ultimate level, same goes for Monodramon to Cyberdramon, and Impmon has story-based digivolving sequences. Although I am disappointed that we did not get a biomerge sequence for Justimon. At the end of this arc, Monkeyfuck Makuramon kidnaps Calmon, which directly leads into the Digital Worlds arc. But before we do that, let's talk about the first movie of the season, Battle of Adventures. Much like Frontier, this movie takes place in the middle of the season and is considered non-canon, except to know it isn't. Takato meets up with his cousin Kai in Okinawa. They plan to rescue a girl named Minami, partnered with a Shizurmon that is being experimented on by Mephistomon, who later becomes Golfmon. The primary colors use their ultimate forms not even a full minute, and before you can say what the hell is going on, the movie's over. Once again, the dub for this movie was in 2004, while Disney held the rights to Saban, and therefore, these movies use Frontier's soundtrack. And here we have another example of us Americans getting the short end of the stick. While this movie is considered non-canon, apparently the character of Kai isn't. He shows up in the third to last episode of the season right before the final battle with the D-Reaper. And because we didn't get Battle of Adventures until after Tamers came out, nobody had any idea who this guy was or what his significance was to Takato. But now we get to the Digital Worlds arc, and while the stakes are increasing, there are some silly moments that the arc offers, including one episode called Kazun Kenta's Excellent Adventure. Here the other characters get their partners, Ryo makes his appearance, and the death of Leomon. This is where the season's darker tones start here. Let's talk about the head writer for this season, Shaiki J. Konaka. And this guy is nuts. Before working on the season, he wrote several experimental shit as well as being a fan of Lovecraft's work. And it comes to no one's surprise that he was the lead writer for the 02 episode His Master's Voice. Now that he was the head writer for an entire Digimon season, he could do whatever the hell he wanted in terms of storytelling. And with the resume I brought up before, you could tell that a lot was on his mind, that being a complete deconstruction of what came before. Our main character isn't a competent leader. Digimon don't digivolve as soon as the season begins. The main focus is on a smaller group of characters. Digimon partners die, and children can become victims of trauma and PTSD. Wait, so you're telling me that people love Tamers because it was different, but they initially hated Frontier because it was different? Wow, people are hypocrites. These 3 episodes lead into the climax of the arc. Leomon dies, Jerry cries, and Takato furious. The girl he has strong feelings towards is emotionally heartbroken, and this rage leads into Takato to force Guilmon to digivolve into a megaform, which Dark digivolves him into Megidramon and goes on a rampage. Both Takato and Guilmon start to reconcile, and gives us a really goofy looking angle of Takato's head, and they eventually become a Gallantmon. The Battle Within is the best episode of the season. Scratch that, the best episode of the entire show! The fight is tightly choreographed, you understand the motivations for both characters, and the animation is stellar. In the end, Jerry has had enough of the senseless fighting and forces both Takato and Beelzemon to stop fighting. The latter leaves right before the Sovereigns show up, tells everybody what's going on, and prepares them for the D-Reaper. I also like this nice scene where when they do return home, everybody greets them with open arms, as well as being escorted out. Again, seeing some Spielberg similarities. But now is where the nightmare fuel begins. And before we do, keep in mind that in the original Japanese version, all of these kids are 10 years old. Yeah, all this shit happens before they hit puberty. In America, we age them up to 1 or 2 years, and it's definitely for the best. The D-Reaper arc starts out on an off-putting note. Jerry is completely drained of both skin color and emotions. As such, many anomalies happen in the real world and become infested in solidified intestines. It's then revealed that Jerry is actually a spy of the D-Reaper, and that the real Jerry is inside of it, and how her appearance influenced the creation of all of the D-Reaper's agents. And then, I guess she ages herself up. Again, I assume. Then she has this line.
Leomon said everyone has their own destiny.
Also, all of the creations of the D-Reaper are different. Maybe a reference to Ava with the angels having unique and distinct appearances, even one who can slip into society without anyone knowing. Now, a question regarding Shareverse is it possible that Shinji saw himself in Takato during this experience? Though Shinji went through more fucked up situations than him. Regardless, this arc basically has everyone team up, set aside their differences and rivalries, to take down an ultimate enemy. It's so simple that it works. But with many things, this has a sad ending. Because of the defeat of the D-Reaper, the Digital World's gate begins to shrink, and also reverts all the Digimon into their in-training forms. Why? I don't know. Henry's dad has an explanation, but I don't care. Everybody says their goodbyes as the song Primary Colors closes us out. Though not before, Takato sees a hole to the digital world where Guilmon's hideout used to be. This leads us into the second movie, Runaway Locomon. And as the name implies, this movie is a rush. Though ironically, the pacing is much better than Battle of Adventure. It wastes no time getting into the conflict and the action. A Locomon is causing havoc only to be revealed that it's being run by a parasite and the Primary Colors have to solve the problem. Everyone is doing the best they can here, both allies and enemies. Parasites keep multiplying, and to top it all off, it's Rika's birthday, and she's pissed because she has to be reminded of the fact that her parents got divorced. One highlight of this movie is Rika has a flashback to when she was with her dad and she sings a song. And in the English dub, it's not bad. Melissa Plant has a pretty solid singing voice, and the music backing it up has some Disney money thrown in there for good measure. Now in Japan, she sings an AIM song, which leads me to believe that the first 3 seasons of Digimon were commercials to buy AIM singles, since it plays again during the end credits. Also, towards the end of the film, Rika's mom starts to sing My Tomorrow. In the beginning of the film, Beelzemon shows up and tries to help, but he says he'll be right back, only to reappear at the very end of the film. Like, bro, where the hell were you? But other than that, I would rank Runaway Locomon as the second best Digimon movie. And that's not saying too much, to be honest. Now, this would be the end of Tamers, and I would get into Shareverse stuff, but gotcha! There's still more content. I forgot to bring this up in the Frontier review, but there is official/non-official Digimon work that is and isn't considered canon at the same time. And Konaka, being the madman that he is, decides to put in the Tamers drama CD that Guilmon and the others went back to the digital world almost immediately after Runaway Locomon because we can't have happy endings. But years later, Konaka, coked out of his mind, wrote a script depicting the cast 16 years later, and more shenanigans happen. And this story is portrayed by having the original Japanese voice actors read out his crack house script on stage. And this story is still going. Just recently, in 2021, the second part was released, where the kids have to defeat a D-Reaper level computer virus called, and I'm not kidding, Political Correctness, who has a signature move called cancel culture. You can't make this shit up. In fact, for the translated subs of this performance, the opening theme song features a text box stating, "This program promotes far-right politics and conspiracy theories." On that day, Digimon became more based than before. So that's Digimon Tamers and the legacy that it leaves behind. It's a season that focuses more on themes and characters than any other season. What more than I can say, but watch it. However, we're not done yet with this video. We still gotta talk about the events that happened in Shareverse following this season. Obviously, the Japanese government had reached a breaking point. Shinjuku was covered in red-pink goop for nearly a week, and they forced Shinji to shut the program down. But Shinji, being so defensive about his project, meant he couldn't do so. As always, the government did cover up the events of the D-Reaper, but just barely. However, Shinji did come up with a last-minute compromise. The decoy companies would be shut down and renovated into becoming government-occupied buildings that would survey the digital world alongside him, as long as his cover isn't blown to the masses. After a tense week of negotiations, the government agreed, calling this private section of their branch DATS, or Digital Accident Tactics Squad. Shinji realized that this was going to be the beginning of the end of his decade of misery. As such, he began to make preparations for the last steps. Shinji ordered the Digimon partners from Tamers to return to the digital world and close the gate entirely. However, much like Impmon, Shinji would make arrangements to the ones that did return when they died. Oh well. But I mean, hey, this is Shareverse and no one's ever really gone. Shinji picked and chose which data would be used for the final Digidestined, as he called them, resulting in the data of Terriermon and Lopmon to be reborn as Digi-Eggs, and this time sent to Colorado to expand his territories beyond his country. This is how Willis got his Digimon. However, one piece of data stuck out to him. Leomon's data was carried over by Impmon. Shinji thought that this could be the perfect way to test out his final plan. However, a Leomon would not suffice. Instead, he converted its data to that of a Batamon. Shinji then picked a random computer in Odaiba to transfer the egg to that household. This would turn out to be the Kamiya residence, with a 4-year-old Kari and her 8-year-old brother Tai. However, due to the unstable amalgamation of data, it rapidly evolved into an absurdly taller Agumon, resulting in the next part of the plan. Shinji summoning a Parrotmon to fight it and pick out the final Digidestined. This was decided by how many kids would witness the fight, and aside from the Kamiyas, 6 were chosen. Shinji began to create partners that would reflect their tamers and eventually be united when that time comes. This was made possible by the Digi-Crystal, a powerful energy source that gives the digital world its features. After the fight, both Parrotmon and Greymon returned to the digital world, and their data was collected. Parrotmon was too damaged to be reborn and was scrapped. As for the Greymon, Shinji gave its Agumon form red wristbands to suppress it from going out of control, becoming a different breed of the species. This Agumon, later dubbed Neo Agumon, would be researched by DATS. However, it broke free and began to run around the streets of Japan. To be continued in Digimon Data Squad.